For 3/4 of a century, the most spectacular ship of its day, and quite possibly the most spectacular ship ever built, has rested comfortably on the ocean floor, hidden from sight deep in the murky depths of the North Atlantic. It would take 73 long years to solve the mystery of its location and final resting place. But after several unsuccessful attempts, the RMS Titanic was finally located in 1985 by a joint American-French team of oceanographers. A year later, American researchers explored the ship up close, and in 1987, further exploration of the Titanic was conducted. This time, retrieval of artifacts from the great ship began. And as a result, we have an opportunity to gain further understanding into one of history's great tragedies. But in order to retrieve these treasures of the Titanic, a scientific mission was mounted that was as technically sophisticated, as well planned, and quite frankly, just as dangerous as landing a man on the moon.
The 1987 mission to the site of the RMS Titanic would bridge a 75-year gap between the ages. The expedition was conducted by a joint French and American research team under the auspices of the prestigious French Oceanographic Institute, IFREMER. The backbone of the operation was the deep-diving submersible Nautile. It is one of only 2 such vessels in the world capable of carrying out this extraordinary assignment. The Nautile is an ultra-sophisticated $20 million submersible packed with the latest in high-tech equipment. The crew thoroughly trained and highly experienced, yet nothing had prepared them for what they found on the ocean floor.
We had landed on the bottom in front of the Titanic about 100 yards and powered up the lights and all the systems, lifted the sub off the bottom in full trim, started moving towards the bow of the Titanic, and it's total darkness down there. And suddenly, in the shadows, looms this just gigantic shape that keeps taking form. And then the shape and the shadows become recognizable.
The mission's chief photographer, Ralph White, recalls the impact of coming upon the most sought-after wreck in the world. White was a member of the 1985 expedition that found the Titanic.
You can see the anchors. You can see the third anchor on the bow. You start to pick up the detail of the chains. It was really an eerie feeling after all these years and all this planning and everything, finally to be there and to realize that I was one of the few people that would ever get a chance to see this magnificent ship.
Prior to the dive, White and the mission commanders confer on the objectives of that day's operation. The submersible is under the direction of Commander P.H. Nargiolet, while the entire expedition is headed by Commandant Jan Karenflecht. Earlier, small sonar devices called transponders have been placed on the bottom. The signals emitted by these transponders allow the Nadir to position herself above the Titanic. The Nautile's descent to the ocean floor is slow and tedious. The 26-foot-long sub has at its core a titanium sphere that is only 6 feet in diameter. It is capable of carrying a 3-person crew to a depth of 20,000 feet. Inside, the pilot sits upright while the co-pilot and observer must recline for the entire duration of the dive. The Nautile's high-tech adventure on the seafloor is really the crowning achievement to a centuries-old desire to journey into and explore this hostile and alien environment. The earliest technology developed in this area seemed tailor-made for a Jules Verne novel. Devices like this primitive diving suit, and this crude 18th century one-man submersible known as a diving barrel were imaginative and occasionally effective devices that allowed the most daring to conduct underwater explorations. Today, technological advances have still not eliminated the one factor that has remained constant through the ages. That factor is the extreme danger involved in any deep ocean expedition. The hazards inherent in a 12,500-foot drop to the ocean floor are overwhelming.
Being able to go to the depth of the Titanic, engineering-wise, is almost as extensive as going to the moon in a space program. It's a totally different type of engineering. In space, you're dealing with an absence of pressure. In the deep ocean, you're dealing with astronomical pressures. The weight of that water on the bottom at 12,500 feet is equivalent to about 6,500 pounds per square inch. That would be almost like taking two pieces of steel, putting a person's body in it, and then driving it over with the Atchison Topeka and the Santa Fe. Probably the most dangerous thing and the thing most likely to happen on a submersible dive, because of the oxygen-enriched atmosphere that we're in and with all the electronics being in the crew sphere, would be a fire. It can only be compared to the Apollo fire in the space program that killed the 3 astronauts. The chances of an implosion are always there. If you had a pinhole leak, it would be a pinhole for a millionth of a second or so, and then the entire sphere would implode, and literally you'd be cosmic dust.
It takes the Nautil an hour and 45 minutes to descend the 2.5-mile journey to the ocean floor. It is a trip through the most extreme conditions.
The descent goes at about 100 feet per minute, and as you descend to approximately 300 feet, the water becomes an intense blue. From 300 feet to 1,000, you go through an intense blue to a total pitch black. At about 2,000 feet, there is no light at all. It is totally pitch black. At about 3,000 feet, you start to pick up creatures which are called bioluminescents. In other words, they are marine life that actually glow. The bottom of the ocean is pitch black. The only thing you can see is whatever your lights illuminate. There are crabs, some mollusks, but mostly just the deep ocean rat tail, which are attracted to the lights. It's the first light these fish have ever seen in their entire lives, and mesmerized by it.
When the submersible first reached the bottom, it was a significant and poignant moment in maritime history. The Nautil, a triumphant success, confronted the greatest of nautical disasters.
What's it like to actually dive to the Titanic? Well, take it from this inexperienced diver that it is an experience filled with a great deal of fear, excitement, and awe. Fear when that submarine hatch is closed and you know there's no turning back. Excitement at the mere thought of seeing something as legendary as the Titanic. And then intense awe when you finally arrive at the bottom of the ocean, 2.5 miles down, and start seeing sights that you know no one else has ever seen before. It certainly is an intensely personal experience that affects everyone who has that chance to do it quite differently. But any way you look at it, no doubt about it, it's the opportunity of a lifetime. Diving on the Titanic and safely exploring the great wreck was indeed a remarkable scientific achievement. And as far as recovering artifacts from the ship, well, that was the culmination of a treasure hunter's dream. But it's important for you to realize that this quest for treasure has nothing to do with obtaining great wealth. It really is about a spirit of adventure and the bold and always perilous attempts by ocean explorers to try and solve the mysteries of the sea.
As an example, in July of 1956, Italy's most luxurious liner, the Addario, was involved in a mid-sea collision with the Swedish liner Stockholm in a fog bank 280 miles off the coast of New York. Suffering a gaping 40-foot hole in her starboard side, the Addario tipped over and sank to the bottom of the Atlantic in 240 feet of water. 25 years later, the noted adventurer and diver Peter Gimble and his wife Elga Anderson began exploring the wreck. In 1984, they mounted an expedition with the goal of retrieving the ship safe and checking out the rumors that the ship sank because a crucial watertight door was missing from the liner. Working from a diving bell, Gimble and his fellow divers succeeded in retrieving the safe and eventually discovered that the collision with the Stockholm had ripped a massive 80-foot hole in the ship's side, flooding the generator room and thus dooming the Andrea Doria. While the recovered treasure was limited, the hazardous expedition was extremely successful. In terms of great treasure, no one comes even close to finding what longtime treasure hunter Mel Fisher located in 1986 off the Florida Keys in the Gulf of Mexico. Fisher, an Indiana chicken farmer, had spent 14 years hunting for the wrecks of two Spanish galleons, the Atocha and the Margarita, which had gone down in a hurricane in the year 1622. After having scoured hundreds of thousands of miles in his search, Fisher and his team of divers finally located the remains of the Atocha in 50 feet of water some 20 miles south of Key West. The treasure, which is spread over 18 square miles of seabed, is still being recovered. The ship's cargo included emeralds from Colombia, pearls from Venezuela, and gold and silver from Peru. The estimated value of the treasure is in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Each new discovery of treasure hidden beneath the seas carries with it a measure of glory, romance, and historical significance. It seems, though, that all recent finds and explorations pale by comparison to the rediscovery of the Titanic. Not a day has passed in the 76 years since its sinking without someone, somewhere, speaking of the Titanic. When the Titanic was finally found, the ship itself was a unique and valuable treasure.
To understand why the artifacts from the Titanic are so rare, it is first necessary to understand why the Titanic herself was so special. After all, there have been thousands and thousands of ships down through the years. But make no mistake about it, the Titanic was special. For at the time she was completed in 1912, she was the biggest, the best, and the most luxurious ship ever built.
As a White Star Line's publicity brochure put it, the Titanic represents the highest attainment in naval architecture and marine engineering and stands for the preeminence of the Anglo-Saxon race in command of the seas.
In order to give you some visual reference as to what we are talking about, we have come to Long Beach, California, where the only ship approaching her era